So there's this show on Netflix called Squidgame
I agree.
that is apparently right now, and
Netflix is not very forthcoming with this sort of information about how many people are actually watching their programs. I mean, for all we know, their top show has like 10 viewers, and we would never know if they don't tell us.
but they have told us proudly that this show, Squidgame, is I think right now, their most popular show across the world on streaming.
Doesn't surprise me too much, since Squid Games is a nicely written show that came out at a time where pretty much every form of art in every medium is either okayish or to downright absolute garbage. So good for Squid Games.
Everybody's watching this thing.
Matt, you yourself will prove for that statement to not be true.
Well, here's the story from the Daily Mail dubbing Squidgame the most twisted series on TV.
So this might be a divisive belief among people, but I actually believe that we should never look up news articles ever about how people feel about certain forms of art, especially now since everything is being so misleading and shit. But I decided to give this Daily Mail a chance, and it seems to me that the problem the Daily Mail has with the show is not of the audience in general being disgusted by violence, but rather of how concerned schools are of children seeing this show, which admittedly is a bit more reasonable.
It says a gruesome Netflix horror series about a fictional deadly game show in which poverty-stricken characters compete battle royale style to win a $27 million cash prize has come under fire from viewers over its unnecessary gore and violence.
The gore and violence is not unnecessary. It's literally the main conflict of the show.
Korean-made Squidgame, which is the most streamed show in the US and in the UK, features grisly scenes of characters being shot in the head and organ harvesting in the latest example of shock tactic programming from the streaming giant. It's become a cult hit with fans. I don't know if you can call it a cult hit when it's the most widely viewed show on streaming right now.
That is correct, Matt, and you have just pointed out some false information with that Daily Mail. Makes you wonder if this article you're reading is really in good faith of this show,
More of a mainstream hit. With fans of the slasher horror genre who have dubbed the 9-part series Saw Meets the Hunger Games and reveled in scenes of torture and mass murder.
The show does not revel itself in that type of shit. The violence and gore in that show is displayed exactly how it would be in real life. It is gruesome, brutal, and it is portrayed as something very bad within the show.
But some TV fans have been left repulsed by the excessive violence, with several saying they could not even make it through the first episode.
Which is fine. You're not obligated to watch anything. If you're uncomfortable with the show and don't want to watch it, that's perfectly fine. However, just because you're not comfortable with watching it doesn't mean said thing is objectively bad. Now, I'm not saying that that's what the article is saying and such. I just wanted to say that. That's all.
And others recommending it be banned for viewers under 20 because it's too gory.
Nothing should be banned from anything. That's bullshit. Now, I will say that I do think the show should recommend for people to be over 20 before watching it, but believe it or not, it's not because of the gore and violence. Everybody's used to that shit by the time they're 12. The reason why I recommend this show to be watched by an older, more mature audience is because the show's subject matter can get pretty dark and morbid and depressing. And believe it or not, some of these depressing moments are outside of the Squid Game itself.
And then it goes into graphic descriptions. I probably don't need.
No, you probably do need to read. It's best to read the entirety of whatever material you're getting your sources from, because if you don't, you could miss some vital information, or better yet, you could miss out some major hints that the information you're getting your sources from are absolute bullshit. And if you are exactly like me, Matt, who doesn't really like to look up the entirety of information from what possible things we're getting our sources from, then you should do what I try to do and just simply not make stuff that requires involvement from said sources.
In each episode of Squid Game, characters take part in bloody versions of traditional children's games like Grandmother's Footsteps or British Bulldogs, with the winners progressing to the next round of the game show. The losers are executed by a masked death squad standing by with machine guns. But I guess does add some extra intensity to Jeopardy or to a game show if that's the way they're doing it.
And then it goes into graphic descriptions of what the show depicts, and I don't need to get into that.
Are you sure about that?
You know, having not watched the show, and I don't plan on watching it.
Oh, you haven't watched the show, eh? Then maybe you shouldn't be talking about it the way you are, or relying on news articles that are known to giving out false information nowadays. You shouldn't be relying on that type of shit to decide what the show is going to be like. Now, to be frank, you can speculate of what something is going to be like based off the word of mouth of news articles and YouTube reviewers and shit like that, or by how terrible a trailer of said something is. But even speculation can be wrong, as what you speculate can be opposite from what the actual product is. Take it from my personal experience. When I first heard of Disney's Encanto, I speculated that that movie was going to be terrible, and I had some pretty good reasons to think of that too. Most other Disney movies were absolute garbage nowadays, and the trailer itself made the film seem like it's going to be another one of those films about acceptances and shit like that. But, to my surprise, and to what I assume is everybody's surprise, Encanto was actually a pretty good film, which is why I am super glad that I have only speculated of what it's going to be like. And Matt, your speculation of what Squidgame is not accurate to what Squidgame is.
It does bring up this conversation about violence in shows and when does it go too far?
I guess, but couldn't you say that about almost anything?
There's a tendency among people, I think on both sides, really, to say that...
both sides of what? What are you referring to?
Well, we try to say this about entertainment in general, whether it's sexual content or violent content. And we say, it's just entertainment. It doesn't have any effect on anybody. Come on. That's silly. What? So I'm going to watch Squid Game and then go out and join a death squad and start executing people? You think that's what I'm going to do? People do the same thing with pornography, and this is really like a form of porn. This is torture porn.
Whether torture porn is acceptable or not is a whole different discussion of what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do with this video, Matt, is to tell you that Squid Games is not torture porn.
Which seems to be coming back into popularity. I can remember when I was a teenager, that was a big genre. That things like Saw. There's a movie called Hostel and other movies where that was the whole attraction to the film. You went and you watched people get tortured for 95 minutes and then you left. And there's really no plot. That's just all that happened.
I haven't seen Saw nor Hostel, but you know what, Matt? I don't believe you. It is very possible that you are wrong about those two. I am going to give benefit of the doubt to pop culture and say that Hostel and Saw are one of those things where on the surface they seem like torture porn, but they too have actual plots. And the reason why I'm giving them that benefit is due to the fact that you're simply labeling Squid Games as torture porn when it is so much more than that.
And it seems like those kinds of shows dipped in popularity but are now surging back into popularity.
You know what, Matt? I actually have a different theory. Torture porn rose up at a certain time because there was a time of experimentation for what people like in films. And my guess is, since torture porn lacks in substance, then it dipped out of popularity forever. And the reason why you're saying it's surging back up again is because you're not actually watching the things you assume are torture porn. The reality is, the things you perceive to be torture porn is stuff with actual substance in them. And it's just that on the surface, they use violence and such to bait people in. Because I will admit, I did first hear about Squid Game through all the violence, but I didn't actually check it out until I've been hearing the fact that it's actually good. I probably should make a separate video on this, but Squid Games used what I call guilty bait, as in having audience curious to check it out at first by advertising something that is usually considered shocking and shit, but it actually keeps its audience with stuff like substance and character arts. So
it's a kind of pornography. It's torture porn.
It's not.
And with actual sexual pornography, you hear the same kind of thing. The people defending it, saying, I'm going to watch porn. You think I'm going to go out and become a rapist? Come on, it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. Many people knows that porn usually fictionalizes relationships and shit in a way that's just not at all realistic. So that's the point where many people actually make fun of said plots. We all know that if your girlfriend catches you fucking her stepmom, she's not gonna want to join in. That doesn't usually happen. Usually the people that are influenced to become rapists by porn or become violent by seeing violent shit on TV are usually the people that purposely seek influence from that stuff because they're already fucked in the head, because they're already nasty people due to outside sources like, say, probably terrible parenting or just living in a shithole, stuff like that. It's never fiction itself that usually influences people to do stuff like that.
Yeah, if you want to be reductive about it and try to draw these simplistic dots and connect them that directly, then yeah, it seems silly. Like, no one is suggesting that you're going to watch a show like Squidgame and then go out and kill people directly as a result.
Especially when said Squidgame condemns said violence.
That would be an absurd thing to suggest, but no one's suggesting it.
Oh, someone is suggesting it. There's always some weird-ass fucker out there that does the very thing that people say, oh, but no one is doing that.
It's just as absurd to suggest that you're not influenced at all by the images and messages and ideas that you sit there passively eating your Doritos and drooling and ingesting. That is also absurd. Of course it has an effect on you.
Oh, I see where this is going. Mostly because I have already seen this video.
We're human beings. We have minds. We are affected by all of the messages and images that we come in contact with. The advertising industry is if we're not affected by images and messages and ideas, then the advertising industry wouldn't exist. And with advertisements, they can influence you in 30 seconds. They can influence you with a billboard you see on the highway for 3 seconds as you're driving by. That's how impressionable, how easily influenced we are.
Alright, I think I know what's going on. Matt Walsh wanted to talk about how people can be influenced by media, which is true. People are influenced by media in some way or form, and some of it can be manipulative. Possibly even torture porn, maybe? That's more up to debates, but I actually do agree with them that there is media out there that's meant to manipulate people. And what I think happened was, he wanted to talk about media manipulation of the mind, and he wanted an excuse to do so, so he decided, oh hey, Squid Games is popular, even though it's torture porn. It's not. I could talk about Squid Games, torture porn, as an example of how media influences people. Because you see, there has been a trend where YouTubers would actually discover something popular and use said popular thing to talk about the thing they really want as an example, which is fine. I hope to do that myself. Basically what happens is something similar to what a good kids movie would do, like say Finding Nemo. They would attract their target audience with kids saying, look, talking fish, while subtly telling an insightful story of how parents should treat their kids and how kids should treat their parents. And that's the same thing with videos similar to what Matt Walsh is trying to make. He wants to talk about mind manipulation, so he decides to use what was popular at the time, Squid Games, as an example of mind manipulation. The problem is, since he didn't actually watch the damn show, he ended up using a completely faulty example of what he's trying to talk about. And that is where his video falls the fuck apart.
And so I do worry about that with pornography, of course, and I worry about that with gratuitous violence in films and in shows.
Which I can actually understand, to be honest. There have been forms of media that have been manipulating people over the dumbest shit. Like fucking Ryan the Last Dragon telling kids that they should trust everybody and everything ever. So, admittedly, Matt, I'm not making fun of you for being worried about this stuff as of itself.
And when I say gratuitous, that doesn't mean that every single show and movie we watch has to be rated G. You know, I don't think that at all.
Good.
Some of my favorite films of all time, Saving Private Ryan, one of my favorite films, extremely violent. I think what makes it gratuitous is when almost all of the entertainment value is in watching people be mutilated and killed in all of these gory and graphic ways.
Then you're gonna love Squid Game because the violence is not all the show has to offer. The real appeal to the show is the character arcs and the intriguing mystery that said Squid Games like to ponder, though the execution of the answer of the said mysteries is still debatable. But yeah, Matt, by your own standards, Squid Game is not a gratuitous show.
When that is the entertainment, if violence is part of the story, you're watching a war film, violence is part of the story. You can't take violence out of that. If you're going to take violence out of a war story, you might as well not tell the story at all. But when the whole story is the violence.
First of all, there are war stories out there with little to no violence at all, like the television show MASH. Second of all, given the right context, I'm sure an entire story about violence can work. It all depends on talented writers.
And the entertainment value is in watching people be ripped open and disemboweled. That's when it becomes gratuitous. And that's when you have to worry about the kind of influence that has on us. And I think the primary influence is not that it's turning people into murderers. It's desensitization. It's moral desensitization.
All right, here we go. The conversation about desensitization in media. Now, I don't have all the information, but just thinking about what I've already know, I think even the desensitization argument is bullshit. I have played a lot of video games where I've seen people torn in half horizontally. It doesn't really faze me that much, although that depends on the context, really. I'm mainly referring to stuff like Doom Eternal, though, and shit like that. Yeah, seen plenty of people torn in half in fiction. However, if I witness that happening in real life, in person, I am pretty damn sure I would still be horrified and suffer post-traumatic stress disorder, and in fact probably would not even be able to play the fiction I have referred to anymore. If anything, I think real life can over-synthesize us about our fiction. But hey, those are only my thoughts. I'm no scientist.
Which is also one of the primary influences of pornography. It's not that it causes you to go out and do things, kind of the opposite. It just turns you into this sort of blank slate. And you become desensitized to these kinds of images. And even though it's fictional, right? If you're watching someone be disemboweled in Squidgame, it's fictional, but if you're sitting there watching it and enjoying it,
you're not supposed to enjoy the disembowelment of Squid Games. That scene is exactly of what it would be in real life. It's meant to be super disturbing and unsettling. That was the point of that scene in Squid Game.
You do have to ask yourself, why do I enjoy watching this? Even though it's fictional, what is it about this? Because part of enjoying a fictional story when you're watching a show, part of the enjoyment aspect is to forget that it's fictional. If you have in your mind the whole time, oh, this is fictional, then you can't enjoy it. That's called breaking the fourth wall, right? So you have to surrender your mind to this story and get into the mentality, sort of pretend that it's not fictional. So then you have to ask yourself, what is it about that I enjoy watching?
Yes, you actually really are supposed to immerse yourself into stories like that, almost as if they were real. However, you are also expected to turn your brain right back on the moment the story ends. You're supposed to instantly be aware that you're in real life again once the story's over. And as such, people are expected to know the difference between fiction and real life.
It is feeding a part of me that probably should not be fed.
Now, to give Matt credit, these are all intriguing things he's saying right now. Whether they're true or not, they are making me think. But I'm not here to discuss much more about desensitization. The point of this video is to prove that Matt has screwed over Squid Game, and I think I have successfully convinced you all such.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.
And what should I do?